All right, the playoff committee releases their second set of playoff rankings tonight at, I don't know, 7 or 8 o'clock, whatever it is. I'll be live tonight at 9 for the call-in show, so feel free to give me a call. We'll talk about tonight's rankings after they come out or whatever else in the world of college football. But I'm going to do my Tuesday college football playoff rankings now. Now, this is based in part on my top 25, not the AP, not the coaches, not last week's playoff ranking from the committee. It's based partly on my top 25 and my projection for how the last 2 weeks of the regular season will go. So I'm going to put my playoff bracket up on the screen. I'm going to first talk about the teams I have in the 12-team playoff. Then I'm going to talk about 3, 4, 5 teams that potentially could get into the playoff that I don't currently have in the 12-team playoff based on some results that we could see over the next 2 weeks. But let's go ahead and get it started. There it is right there. Shout out to Sleeper for sponsoring today's video. Make sure you download the Sleeper app. You'll be glad you did. You can have yourself some fun watching these college football games and maybe even win yourself some money. Download the Sleeper app today. Promo code Lou, L-O-U. All right. I've got Ohio State as the 1 seed. I truly believe that of all the teams in college football, I don't know that there's anybody that can beat Ohio State if Ohio State plays up to their ceiling. And to be honest with you, I don't know that we've even seen Ohio State do that. They seem like they are sort of going through the motions, a little bored. They are so much better in most cases than the teams that they are playing from week to week that it's honestly kind of scary. It's almost the opposite of last year. There was a lot of doubt around Ohio State last year, not the talent, but sort of the way they were playing. And then they had the loss to Michigan. And, okay, what does this mean? What's going to happen to Ryan Day? How far can they go into playoffs? Well, they found another gear, and they blew through the playoffs last year, right? This year, they have looked pretty good to me week in and week out. I don't know. It seems to me like they're playing in second gear, and I don't mean that as an insult. Everything they do looks so easy. And if they do what they did last year, and find another gear in the postseason, and they play to that potential in the postseason, I don't know that there's a team that can beat them. So right now, I've got them winning out the regular season, which would include a win over Michigan in the last week of the regular season, which would, of course, eliminate Michigan from any playoff potential. Michigan currently with just 2 losses. And while I think the Big Ten championship game will be a good one between Ohio State and Indiana, my projections have Ohio State winning the Big Ten championship game, so I've got them as the number 1 overall seed. I've got Texas A&M as the number 2 overall seed. Now, this I am not nearly as confident in as I am this Ohio State prediction here. Texas A&M, when you look at sort of their progression over the course of the season, they have a really good win against Notre Dame on the road in South Bend early in the season, right? And they haven't lost any games. They've won every game they've played. But through a scheduling quirk, or it's just happenstance, how it happened to work out, all of their SEC wins are against the bottom 7 teams in the SEC. They haven't played Bama. They haven't played Georgia. They haven't played Ole Miss. They haven't played Tennessee. They haven't played Vandy. That's not Texas A&M's fault, and that doesn't mean that Texas A&M's not any good. But because it's just been a long time since we've seen Texas A&M play a quality opponent, got to go all the way back to that Notre Dame game. When I say quality opponent, I mean a top 15 type team. It's hard to know for sure exactly how good they are. I like Marcel Reed. A&M has looked good on both sides of the ball for the majority of the season. They had the hiccup in the first half against South Carolina this past week. And obviously, if they play like that against Texas to end the season, or in the SEC championship game, or against almost anybody in the playoffs, then obviously they would lose. But they haven't played like that very often, that first half against South Carolina. They've looked really, really good. So right now, I am projecting them to beat Texas at the end of the regular season and win the SEC championship, which I think would give them the 2 seed. I've got Indiana at 3 as the loser of the Big Ten championship game. I think that will be their first loss of the season. I don't think the committee will punish Indiana for losing to a number 1 ranked Ohio State. But because A&M in this scenario would be 13-0 with an SEC championship, I've got A&M 2, Indiana 3, as opposed to Indiana 2, A&M 3. At 4, I've got Texas Tech. I am higher on Texas Tech than any ranking I've seen, AP, coaches, playoffs. I've watched a lot of Texas Tech this year. Admittedly, because I'm a degenerate gambler and I've been betting on Texas Tech a lot this season. They've won every game they've played by 23 points or more, with the exception of their loss on the road at Arizona State, a game they played without their starting quarterback. They look really, really good. They might have the best defensive player in football this year, Jacob Rodriguez, that linebacker. Their offense is efficient. They can put up points in bunches. I think Texas Tech is really, really good. And I feel like if Texas Tech finishes out the regular season with just that one regular season loss, again, a loss without their starting quarterback, who now is back and healthy, and they beat, say, BYU again, or whoever it happens to be in the Big 12 championship game, and they're sitting there at 12-1, and their only loss was 2 months ago with a backup quarterback, not only do I think they should get the 4th seed, I think they would deserve it, I think. So I've got them at the 4. A lot of other rankings and projections that you look at will have a second SEC team at the 4, whether that be Georgia, Bama, whatever the case. I feel like conference championships still matter. I'm starting to think I'm in the minority in that position. But right now, I still value conference championships. And I think Texas Tech is not – I don't think it's right to look at Texas Tech as, well, they won the Big 12, so we got to put them in. Texas Tech is there's no doubt in my mind that Texas Tech is one of the best 10 teams in the country. They deserve to be in everyone's top 10. Forget about what conference they're in. Watch them play. And if they go 12-1 and win the Big 12, I feel like they deserve and should have a first-round bye, and so I've got them at the 4 spot. I've got Georgia at the 5, not Alabama, even though I feel like right now we are going to see Texas A&M and Alabama in the SEC championship game. I think Georgia is going to go 11-1. They play Charlotte this week and Georgia Tech to close out the season. I think Georgia's going to go 11-1, but miss the SEC championship game due to opponent win percentage tiebreakers within the SEC. And I think Alabama, with 2 losses, but only 1 SEC loss, will play Texas A&M in the SEC championship. I think Bama will take their 3rd loss in that SEC championship game, which is why I have Georgia at the 5. Even though I don't have Georgia participating in the SEC championship game. They will have the 1 loss by 3 to Alabama. Alabama at this point would have 3 losses, the 3rd loss coming in the SEC championship game. I've got Georgia as the 5 seed. At the 6 seed, I've got Ole Miss, another SEC team that I think is going to finish 11-1, but get left out of the SEC championship game due to opponent win percentage tiebreakers. The Lane Kiffin situation and what, if any, impact that will have on Ole Miss's seeding in the playoffs, I don't know. We've seen the committee punish teams who were playoff worthy or borderline playoff worthy because they were without a key player. Think back to Florida State a few years ago in the Jordan Travis injury. I don't know what the committee would do with an 11-1 SEC playoff team who is headed to the playoffs with an interim head coach. I don't even know if they're going to have an interim head coach. It may still be Lane Kiffin. I don't know. So for the purposes of what I'm doing here, I'm not taking the Lane Kiffin situation into account at all. I'm just looking at Ole Miss's schedule, thinking it looks like 11-1. They're on a bye this week, and then they have the Egg Bowl against Mississippi State. I'm assuming Ole Miss wins that game and finishes the regular season 11-1, but misses out on the SEC championship game. I've got them at the 6 seed. I've got Oregon at the 7, and this is another one that I am extremely not confident in. Oregon's got a couple of tough games left starting this weekend at home against Southern Cal, and then they close out the regular season with Washington. Those 2 quality opponents. Southern Cal is also fighting for a playoff spot, and I'm going to talk about Southern Cal in a minute when I talk about the sort of 3 or 4 teams right on the outside of my playoff bracket that still have a really good chance of getting in, because Southern Cal is one of those teams. But for what I'm projecting here, since it's a home game for Oregon, I guess I'm projecting Oregon to win that game. I think they're about a 10-point favorite in that game. Now, I think Southern Cal can go in there and win. I have not been overly impressed with Oregon so far this season, but because it's a home game, because they're favored by 10, I'm sort of giving them the benefit of the doubt, at least in terms of this playoff projection. So that would have Oregon finishing the regular season at 11-1. Even if they lose one of their 2 remaining games, I think it's possible they still get in, but not a guarantee. I'm not convinced a 10-2 Oregon would get in with a loss to either Southern Cal or Washington right at the end of the year. because you're going to have a lot of 2-loss teams kind of fighting for that last spot. And I'm not sure how Oregon would compare with some of those other teams, which again, we'll talk about in a minute when I start talking about some other teams that I don't have in my ranking, but could possibly get in. Vandy at 10-2, for example, Oklahoma, at 10-2, I see I've got them in. But anyway, we'll go through that in a second, but I've got Oregon here winning out 11-1, no Big Ten championship game though. That's going to be Ohio State and Indiana, and Oregon getting the 7 seed there. At the 8 seed, I've got Ole Miss. Ole Miss 6, sorry. The 8 seed, I've got Oklahoma. Big win for them this past weekend against Alabama on the road. That's back-to-back road wins for them against Tennessee and now Alabama in must-win games. They have been with 2 losses for a while now. They, of course, lost to Ole Miss, and then earlier in the season took a loss to Texas. So they've got to win out if they want any chance at all to get in. I've got them winning out in this scenario, although, again, it is possible that they do drop a game somewhere along the way. They closed the season out with LSU, and although LSU is without a coach and hasn't looked great over the last few weeks, because there is so much talent on that team, if LSU were to put a game together and sort of play up to their potential, I think potentially that could be an interesting game there with Oklahoma's playoff chances on the line at the end of the year. But in this scenario, I've got them at the 8. For the 9 seed, I've got Alabama. Again, 10-2. I've got them winning out in the regular season to finish 10-2, playing Texas A&M in the SEC championship game and losing. So this would be a 10-3 Alabama team with the 9 seed. At the 10 seed, I've got Georgia Tech. The ACC, they're only going to get 1 team in. There was a scenario where they didn't get any teams in. I think right now, though, the winner of the Georgia Tech and Pitt play this weekend. They each have 1 conference loss. The winner of that game is going to go to the ACC championship game. And if the winner of that game wins the ACC championship, that will be a playoff team for sure. I think Georgia Tech has been the most consistently good team over the course of the season in the ACC. I think Miami might be the best overall team with the highest potential, but the reality is they didn't live up to that potential, and they took a couple of bad losses, one at home to Louisville, one on the road at SMU. I don't know how bad those losses are necessarily, but the point is, because they were conference losses, it has kept them out of getting to the ACC championship game. It would take complete and utter chaos the last 2 weeks of the regular season for Miami to even make it to the ACC championship game. So you're probably going to have a 10-2 Miami sitting there at the end of the year on the bubble, similar to the position they found themselves in last year. But right now, and I don't have much confidence in this because the ACC from week to week is very up and down in terms of who plays well and who doesn't. And Georgia Tech's defense has been a massive liability over the second half of the season. But right now, I've got Georgia Tech winning the ACC. I think they probably lose to Georgia at the end of the year, which would be their second loss, even if they beat Pitt this week. But I've got them getting to the ACC championship game and winning it. If they happen to lose to Pitt this weekend, then I would swap them out with Pitt, I guess. But right now, I do think the ACC will get a team in. That team is Georgia Tech. I've got them at the 10 seed. For the 11, I've got BYU. Now, this is the most difficult one for me of all. Let's skip that for a second and get to the 12 seed. I've got James Madison. This has gone back and forth. South Florida looked like the group of 5 team for most of the year, but they've taken a couple of losses here recently. Memphis was hot for a while, but they lost a game recently. Tulane still has a chance. They're ranked in the top 25. Navy still only has the 1 loss. But right now, if I had to put a dollar on who I think the G5 rep is going to be, it's going to be James Madison, so I've got him at the 12 seed. Now let's backtrack to BYU at 11. BYU only has 1 loss, and it's to a team that I think has a chance to win it all, Texas Tech. I think Texas Tech can compete with anybody in the world of college football this season. I don't think they're a Big 12 fluke. I don't think they're a result of a weak schedule. I think when you watch Texas Tech play, they don't look much different to me than the other teams in your mind that you think have a chance of winning it all. Whoever those teams are, Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, Georgia, Ole Miss, however far down the list you want to go. I don't see a lot of difference between Texas A&M and those other teams in terms of overall talent or how good of a team they are. So I think they're legitimately good. If BYU goes 11-1 in the regular season, and their only loss is to that Texas Tech team that I just talked about, and they're ranked inside the top 12 before the Big 12 title game is played, and this is the key part here, Because we've heard the committee talk in the past, and we've heard every talking head on the planet talk about you should not be punishing teams who lose their conference championship game to the benefit of a team that didn't play in a conference championship game. In other words, if you're ranked third and you lose your conference championship game, okay, maybe you drop down to fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever it is, right? But you're still within that top 12. You're still making the playoff. You're not getting eliminated from the 12-team playoff because of a conference championship game loss, a 13th game, that the majority of the other teams in college football either didn't have to play or, in Notre Dame's case, choose not to because they're scared. We only have 1 year of the 12-team playoff to go off of. Last year, not a single team that was ranked within the top 12 the week before fell out of the top 12 because they lost their conference championship game. And SMU is the most sort of relevant example to what might happen this year to BYU. There's a lot of talk and controversy at the end of the year when Clemson beat SMU in the conference championship game about what should happen with SMU. And because they were well within the top 12 before the conference championship game was played, they lost a close game. The committee ended up leaving them in the top 12 and awarding them a playoff spot. Would they do the same thing with BYU? I think they probably should. I don't know if they will. My playoff projection would not punish BYU for losing their conference championship game to the extent that it removes them from the 12-team playoff. So I basically have BYU going 11-1 in the regular season. Their only loss being to Texas Tech, on the road at Texas Tech, by the way, and then losing to Texas Tech in a rematch in the Big 12 title game at a neutral site. And I'm dropping them as far as I can without putting them behind a group of 5 team James Madison. So I've got BYU with my 11 spot. Now let's talk about some teams I don't have in here. The obvious one up first will be Notre Dame. Do I think Notre Dame can make an argument that they're one of the 12 best teams or that they deserve to be included in this 12-team playoff based off of their resume alone this season? Yeah, they've looked pretty good over the last couple of months. They just destroyed Pitt this past weekend. They beat the life out of Navy. They've got a win over Southern Cal. Those are 3 good wins. I can't put them in over Miami, and I can't put Miami in. Miami is going to finish the season 10-2, it looks like. Now, they've got 2 games left, and if they lose one, then this is a whole totally different conversation here. For me, this is just a principled stance. I don't know what benefit there is to Miami, or put your own team in Miami's shoes. Why did Miami schedule that game against Notre Dame early in the year? What benefit has Miami gotten from scheduling and beating a top 10 team in week 1? What benefit have they received for that? They've got the exact same record as Notre Dame. They've got just as many ranked wins as Notre Dame. They beat Notre Dame. And you've got people that are going to put Notre Dame into the playoffs and not Miami. I could not disagree with that any more strongly than I do. Does the regular season matter or not? We beat our chest as college football fans that we've got the best regular season in all the sports because every game matters. If you put a 10-2 Notre Dame team into the playoffs over a 10-2 Miami team that beat that Notre Dame team, then you're telling me and every other college football fan that the games don't matter. It's just about who you think is better today. And while I understand that because of the format we have in college football, there is always going to be some opinion and some subjectivity in what we do, there needs to be as little opinion and subjectivity as possible. And when you have an objective point to rely on, you should use the objective point over the subjective point every single time. I don't think that all teams with the same record are created equal. I don't think that every 1-loss team is better than every 2-loss team. That's not what I'm saying at all. Schedules are vastly different. Teams get better and worse over the course of the season. I completely understand that. I totally understand that. But when you start talking about things like, well, Notre Dame has better losses than this team, in this case, Miami, or, Notre Dame is playing better today than Miami is. Okay, those are all opinions, and I might agree with some of those opinions. But the fact is, they've got the same record, and one team beat the other. I cannot justify having Notre Dame ranked ahead of Miami as long as they've got the same record. I just cannot do it, and I won't do it. Now, if Miami loses this week or they lose the following week, they got to play Pitt. Pitt's a good team. Maybe they lose to Pitt. Okay, then you go, look, yeah, Miami beat Notre Dame in September, but Miami's got 3 losses. Notre Dame's got 2. So now we can move Notre Dame ahead of Miami. Okay, I could be talked into that. But not if they have the same. Ask yourself this. Alabama lost this past weekend to Oklahoma, right? That's Alabama's second loss. Prior to that, Alabama only had 1 loss. Georgia all season has had 1 loss, that 1 loss to Bama. There isn't a poll on the planet anywhere that ever had Georgia ahead of Bama after that loss because they had the same record. Bama had a loss to Florida State to start the season. Georgia then lost to Bama. From that point till this past weekend, Bama and Georgia had the same record. 1 loss. So every single poll and ranking you looked at, mine, the AP, coaches, playoff, every idiot that puts a top 25 out everywhere, every single one of them, no matter how good they thought Georgia was or could be, no matter how good they thought Georgia looked the week before, Alabama goes on the road and by a miracle barely beats a terrible South Carolina team. Rankings come out the following Monday. Bama's still ahead of Georgia. In my ranking, in your ranking, AP, coaches. Why? They had the same record and they played, and we all saw Alabama win the game. This past weekend, Alabama takes their second loss. Georgia beats Texas. Now, they no longer have the same record. So what does everybody do? Every ranking now, Georgia ahead of Bama. I've now got Georgia ahead of Bama. The AP's got Georgia ahead of Bama. The coaches have Georgia ahead of Bama. The playoff ranking tonight will have Georgia ahead of Bama. Because Bama took another loss, and those teams no longer have the same record. But the entire time those teams had the same record, the team that won was ranked ahead of the team that lost, as it should be. Look, I've had a lot of fun on this channel over the years pointing and laughing at Miami fans for a lot of dumb things they do and say, and their team hasn't been very good, and they've never won the ACC, and all the funny stuff that we talk about. In other words, I'm no Miami fan. If I was a Miami fan, I would be irate. I'd be beside myself that we scheduled Notre Dame. We beat them. And now here we are at the end of the year. We've got the identical record, and they're in the playoffs, and we're not. Every single program in America that has Notre Dame scheduled starting next year and beyond should cancel that game immediately, because there's no benefit to you in playing Notre Dame. And the committee told you that last week when they put their rankings out, and they had Notre Dame at 9 or whatever it was, in Miami so far out of the playoffs they couldn't see it with a telescope. Beating Notre Dame means nothing to the committee. So why should anyone schedule Notre Dame? You know who needs your team to schedule Notre Dame? Notre Dame. If teams stop scheduling Notre Dame, they'll never make another playoff. And then they'll have to do what's right and join a conference. I cannot put Notre Dame ahead of Miami. And because I don't have Miami in my top 12, I can't have Notre Dame in my top 12. Now, they're both right on the outside looking in. And if Miami loses another game, then Notre Dame's going to move up because they'll no longer have that same record. Miami will have an additional loss. But until that happens, Notre Dame is not getting above Miami in any ranking I do. And I don't have Miami in my 12-team playoff, so Notre Dame's not in it. Now let's talk about a couple other teams that are close. Vandy, 10-2. They need to beat, obviously, Tennessee at the end of the year to have any shot at all. But I think it's a less than 50% chance they get in, even if they go 10-2. Here's what could change that. Southern Cal's got 2 losses. Oregon's got 1. I have Oregon beating Southern Cal this week. If Southern Cal beats Oregon, now you've got a whole other set of issues. Now you've got Oregon at 10-2, Southern Cal at 10-2, Vandy at 10-2, Miami at 10-2, Notre Dame at 10-2, BYU probably at 11-1, then 11-2 after a Big 12 title game loss. There's not room for all of those teams. Last year, all of the complaints at the end of the playoff selection process were, what about these 3-loss teams? We think they're better than these 2-loss teams. Remember, Alabama fans were crying. They had 3 losses, thought they should have been in. Same thing with South Carolina, Illinois, Ole Miss. This year, you're gonna have 2-loss teams that can't get. There's not going to be enough room for the 2-loss teams. Never mind whatever 3-loss teams happen to be crying. So that brings me to the Texas argument. There are still some people around that think if Texas beats Texas A&M at the end of the year, they should be considered for one of these 12 playoff spots. I couldn't disagree more. First of all, they've got a terrible loss on the road at a horrible Florida team, and they got blown out by Georgia. Now, losing to Georgia is not a bad loss in and of itself, but they got blown. They lost 35-10. I don't think a 9-3 Texas got any business being anywhere near the playoffs. Anywhere near. Because you're going to put a 9-3 Texas a team in over, let's say, a 10-2 Oregon? Or a 10-2 Southern Cal? The Vandy argument would be interesting because they did beat Vandy. So what do you do with 9-3 Texas versus 10-2 Vandy? That's a debatable point there if it were to come down to that. But I don't think it will. Miami 10-2, Notre Dame 10-2. So I don't know. There's going to be, I think it's going to get ugly when the last playoff ranking comes out that actually seeds the playoffs, the ranking on that Sunday after conference championship Saturday. If BYU, let's say BYU is ranked 9th or 10th when they play Texas Tech in the Big 12 title game and they lose. All right. That would be BYU's second loss that they took in the 13th game. You're telling me the committee is going to bump BYU out of the playoffs for losing their second game in their 13th game, but put Notre Dame in, who has 2 losses in 12 games and didn't have to risk a loss on championship Saturday? Maybe. But I think that is bad precedent if they do that. So anyway, I don't know how it's going to shake out. Obviously, trying to predict this now, we know there's going to be upsets. Texas A&M might lose to Texas. Alabama might lose the Iron Bowl to Auburn. Georgia might lose to Georgia Tech. Georgia would still get into the playoffs, but they wouldn't have a 5 seed, right? They'd probably, 7 or 8 seed. So it would rearrange some of the seeding there, depending on what losses happened. Pitt could beat Georgia Tech. If that happens, the ACC opens back up again. You don't know who might get in. I do think it matters in terms of BYU. Do they lose to Texas Tech by 4 or do they lose to Texas Tech by 24? I think that probably matters if you're BYU, right? What if Oklahoma loses to LSU at the end of the year? They're out. That opens up a spot. Who gets it? What if Southern Cal beats Oregon and they're both 10-2? You can't put Oregon in without putting Southern Cal in. Well, you can if you're a committee because you're putting Notre Dame in without putting Miami in. This is how dumb this is. If Southern Cal beats Oregon this weekend, they're going to both be 10-2, and Southern Cal will have beat Oregon. That would, what the committee is doing with Notre Dame would be like if they watched Southern Cal beat Oregon, both of them were 10-2. But then they still put Oregon in and leave Southern Cal out. People would lose their mind if that happened. So why are we going to sit around and watch that happen with Notre Dame and Miami? It just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense at all. But anyway, this is my playoff projection as of today. What is today? November 17th, 16th? 18th. I don't know what day it is. I think it's the 18th. This is my playoff projection as of today, November 18th. Again, the updated rankings come out tonight around 7 or 8 o'clock. I'll be live at 9 o'clock on the call-in show, so feel free to give me a call. We can talk about these rankings here, mine, or we can talk about the actual playoff seat rankings that come out tonight, or just the world of college football in general. Uncle Lou After Dark every Tuesday and Thursday night at 9 p.m., YouTube's longest-running college football call-in show. All right, everybody, I appreciate you watching. Let me know what you think down below, and have a good morning.